All right, so now let's look at our logic to login. So um, now we have a lot of folder. Let me explain the folders and what they are doing. So when you come to our application, inside the app, we have the main file that is what is running the whole application. We have the util file, we have the util folder, we have the security folder, we have the routes, we have repository and model. And this is where we put all our models. The repository is where we put all our create, read, update, and delete functions. And then route. So in Fast API, you can have smaller routes and then mount them on the main file as a bigger route, as a bigger chunk of routes. So I have two files here. One is called authenticates, and other one is user activity, where we write all the user activity code. But for the meantime, let's look at the authenticate. So in our authenticate code, I have to import a route from Fast API. So I imported route. I have to import API route. Sorry. So I imported API route from Fast API. I have to initialize my DB. Then I created a URL. So this URL is called register, which I'm not making use of it yet. I will come back to explain later. But what I'm interested in is this URL called login. So anytime you hit this URL /login from our application, it calls this function login, and this function takes an input of or two password request form. I mean, it is not a good practice to just build your login to use inputs, but rather we use form inputs. We use form data. Sorry, we use form data. So this or two password request form is actually a form data that you need to use in order to make your application more security wise. So I imported the O2 password request form from Fast API security. Then this will bring my password and then the email. So after getting the inputs in a variable called request, I pass it to a function on the user CRUD called authenticate. So we'll go there. So in this function called authenticate, what we do is that we go and then look. We call another function called gets by email. So I think I can modify this function, but I won't do it now. We call another function called get by email, and all that we pass to this function is the user email address and then the DB connection. So I think this function is supposed to be down there, get by email. All that this function does is that it goes to the database and then look for the user that email has been passed into it, and then return it back here. So after returning it back here, we check. If no user, we raise an exception that's invalid credential, and then invalid credential. I think I can change this exception to user not found as well. So we can raise an exception invalid credential, but I can change it to user not found as well. But if user is found, we now go ahead to verify the password. So from my file, right, I earlier explained this file, hashing file. So earlier I made mention that we have two functions. Instead, we have a class and then two methods. So one method is a bcreate and the other one is the verify. So inside the verify block, we take the password that has been entered, the plain password. We don't decode, but rather we use the library to encode and then compare. So when we compare and everything is okay, we now move a step ahead. We now move a step ahead here. So if everything is okay, we now look out for the user role. So first we check whether the user has a role. If the user doesn't have a role, we can just give the user a row of user. If not, we move on here on line 26, and then we use the user rule. We make use of the user rule, and then we print it to see whether that's the rule that we are looking out for. So in this case, when we try to print, it's supposed to print super admin because we have a user, initial user assigned super admin role to it. I will demonstrate it for you to see. So then we create a token. So in the course of the generating the token, we have another file called token. So in this file, I've imported JOS. You need to install JOS. It will help you to use the JTW package to do all your token generation. So before you can generate a token, you need secrets, you need algorithm, you need token expiring the minutes. So a token actually have to take some time to expire. So we have all this in our config file. So when you come back to our config file in the utility, you should actually see this. So this is the time I'm expecting my token to expire, and I'm generating this. I'm generating the secret key using Python secret library. So I'm generating a 32-bit secret. Yes, and then I'm calling my algorithm from my .environment file as I showed earlier. So this is my .environment file. I'm calling this HS256 algorithm in my token. So now that I have all this parameter, I go ahead to create a token. So this is a function that generates a token. And a data is passed. So the data that we pass is the row. Let's go back to that function and look at the data. So we pass in the row and then the email into this function in token file, and this function copy the data, add the expiring time to it, and then does the encoding, and then generates the token for us. This token is therefore returned back in this variable, and then we send it to the user. I think I added the row to it for a logic in the UI, which I will explain later on. Then we send the token type, and then the row back to the user as a login details.